What is up, guys? Sinister Tales here. Before we get into tonight's video, just a quick reminder. If you end up enjoying these stories, please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you have any thoughts or interpretations about the stories, drop them in the comments below. One of my favorite parts of doing this is reading what you all have to say. If you've got your own scary story you'd like to share, check the links in the description. You'll find my email, Facebook, and Twitter there. You can message me on any of those, and I'll do my best to feature your story in a future video. If you send something in, please include how you'd like to be credited, a title for your story if it has one, and any themes it falls under. With all that out of the way, let's jump right into today's true scary stories. I hope you enjoy, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again tomorrow. I was 11 years old, living in a quiet suburb on the edge of a pretty calm city. I don't remember hearing gunshots or seeing any real violence where we were. Most of the people I knew were simple, hard-working types who'd help you however they could. This happened on a cool fall day in 2007. I'd spent most of the day at a friend's house playing games. Around 5 p.m., I went home for dinner, then headed back over. Not long after, my friend had to leave due to some family issues, and I ended up alone and bored in his yard. As I wandered around aimlessly, I spotted some kittens playing in the bushes. At that age, I was obsessed with cats, playing with them, petting them, even though I usually ended up covered in scratches. I still told my mom I wanted to be a veterinarian back then. It would be years before I learned what that really involved. I ran toward the kittens and crawled into the bushes after them on my hands and knees. While I was searching, I heard tires squeal in the distance. A moment later came a series of pops. I assumed someone was setting off firecrackers and kept looking for the kittens. A few seconds later, though, the squeal of tires came again, much closer this time, and another burst of pops followed. It sounded like it was coming from the next street over. That's when I finally stopped crawling and peered out through the brush. Our house was the second from the corner, so from our yard you could see the cross street pretty well. Down the road, I saw a car speeding in our direction. Right behind it was an SUV, hugging its bumper, and those popping sounds were now very loud. As the first car reached the intersection by our corner, it swerved wildly, took a hard turn, and crashed into a neighbor's flower bed next to the stop sign. I stared, completely locked in on what was happening, waiting for someone to get out of the wrecked car. Nobody moved. Maybe 10 seconds later, the SUV pulled up and stopped right beside the crashed vehicle. A tall man in a beanie and sweater jumped out and ran to the driver's side of the wrecked car. He was holding something, but I couldn't see what it was at first. I figured he was going to check on the driver. I was wrong. He reached the driver's side door, raised his hand, and there was a deafening series of bangs. Muzzle flashes lit up the interior. That's when it clicked. Those pops I'd been hearing were gunshots. I was watching someone get murdered in cold blood. I froze in the bushes, terrified that if I moved he'd hear or see me. Looking back, he was probably too focused on what he was doing to notice anything else. As he turned to run back to the SUV, I heard him yell something about cutting people off. At the time, I didn't understand what that meant, but years later, I realized this had to be a road rage incident. After firing several shots into the car, the man sprinted back to the SUV and sped away. I waited until he was gone, then scrambled out of the bushes and ran straight home. I burst inside and tried to tell my mom what I'd just seen, but I was talking so fast she couldn't make sense of it. I grabbed her hand and dragged her outside, pointing at the crashed car. By then, a few neighbors had already gathered around, trying to help. My mom quickly pulled me back into the house and called 911. The police and paramedics arrived soon after. Officers started moving from person to person, asking what they'd seen. When they got to us, my mom said she thought she'd seen the crash. At that point, only a couple of people knew the truth. I told the officer exactly what I'd witnessed. My mom flipped out, insisting I was lying. The officer took her aside and quietly told her that I seemed to be telling the truth. She panicked and started yelling at me about my safety and how dangerous that man could be. Eventually, I gave the police a description of the shooter and they left. For the next few weeks, my mom barely let me out of her sight. I later learned that there were discussions about me possibly testifying in court, even after the guy had been caught. I don't know how much weight the testimony of an 11-year-old would really have, but that's what my mom said. In the end, the shooter took a plea deal and admitted to the murder. Still, my mom stayed overprotective until I was well into my late teens. Honestly, I doubt he ever realized anyone had seen him. About 5 years ago, I looked up the case and found out that he'd been killed in a prison fight not long after being locked up. The driver he killed turned out to be a mechanic who'd been tested driving a freshly repaired car. It's a tragic story all around, but I guess you could say the killer eventually got what was coming to him. My scariest college experience happened during my sophomore year. I went to a relatively small school, small enough that you could walk from one end of campus to the other in under 20 minutes. I lived in one of the dorms on campus, and that year I had the hardest class schedule I'd ever taken. I was constantly stuck working on assignments late into the night in various academic buildings. One night I was in a lab, working on an assignment that took me almost until midnight. When I finally finished, I packed my stuff and headed out. The building was nearly deserted, and most of the lights had already been turned off. The campus outside felt like a ghost town. I had about a 10-minute walk back to my dorm. A few minutes into the walk, I cut through a courtyard and noticed a guy moving oddly along the side of a building, keeping close to the wall. I had to walk past that area, so I glanced over. Even in the dim light, I could tell he didn't look like a student or staff member. The strangest thing, though, was that he appeared to be wearing some kind of mask. From what I could make out, it looked like a black ski mask covering his face. I thought it was weird, but I kept going. About 2 minutes later, I got a sudden, strong, bad feeling and looked over my shoulder. The man was walking in the same direction I was now. He was still a good distance back, but clearly on my path. Earlier, he'd just been loitering. My stomach dropped. I hoped I was just being paranoid and that he was heading somewhere else, but it didn't feel that way. As I got closer to my dorm, I checked behind me again. He was still there, trailing me. I couldn't hear his footsteps. He was moving quietly, but I could feel his presence. I sped up a bit. He was far enough behind that I still felt I could make it into the building safely if I just kept moving. For the next couple of minutes, I forced myself not to look back. I didn't hear him, and for a moment I started to relax. Then my dorm came into view. I risked another glance. He was still there and much closer now, maybe 20 feet behind me. That's when I really started to panic. He was absolutely following me. Still, the dorm entrance was right ahead. I hurried inside, swiped my key fob, slipped through the second set of doors, and made sure they closed fully behind me. He hadn't reached the doors yet. I felt a rush of relief, like I'd narrowly dodged something awful. The lobby was empty. As I moved down the first hallway, a student walked past me going the other way, heading toward the exit. I assumed they were leaving the building. My room was on the 4th floor, and this dorm had no elevator, only stairs at the very end of the hall. As I walked, I had a sudden, horrible thought. What if that student held the door open for the masked guy and let him inside? Maybe 5 seconds after that thought hit me, I heard the lobby door open down the hall. I still hadn't reached the stairwell. Footsteps followed. I turned and looked. The masked man had entered the hallway and was moving quickly toward me. I bolted into the stairwell and ran up as fast as I could. By the time I reached the 4th floor, I could hear him in the stairwell below. I sprinted down the hall, dove into my room, and slammed the door just as I heard him reach the top of the stairs. He didn't come to my door. I watched through the peephole, listening, braced for him to try the knob. He never did. Instead, I called the police and told them everything. Officers came, swept the entire dorm, and eventually found the man hiding in the basement. He wasn't a student at all. I never found out exactly what he was doing on campus. The student who'd left after me had, in fact, let him in. At some point between me seeing him outside and him entering the building, he'd taken off the ski mask and told that student he was checking out the university for his kid. Once inside, he must have put the mask back on. The whole thing left me afraid to walk across campus after dark for a while. Thankfully, nothing like it ever happened again. What are you supposed to do when teenagers are the ones terrorizing you? I'm not asking that rhetorically. I mean it. What are the rules, legally and morally? I was on a work trip, driving to a town about 3 hours from home. My job sends me all over the region, and I usually need to be on site by 6 o'clock or 6:30 a.m. For longer trips, I typically leave in the middle of the night. On this particular night, I wasn't feeling well. A little over halfway through the drive, I started feeling awful and decided to stop at a rest area. I needed to use the bathroom, rinse my face, and try to pull myself together. I was in the restroom for maybe 15 minutes. No need for details. When I came back out and started walking toward my car, 4 teenagers I'd never seen before stepped in front of me. They were clearly under 18. One of them said something I couldn't make out. A split second later, another one slammed me on the back of the head, and then all 4 of them were on me, kicking and punching while I curled into the fetal position on the pavement. I already felt like I was going to throw up. Now I was being beaten on top of it. I couldn't bring myself to really fight back because, as crazy as it sounds, they were kids. While they were hitting me, they yanked my phone and wallet out of my pockets. I managed to shove one of them away and got a vicious kick to the head for my trouble. Somehow, I staggered to my feet and sprinted to my car. Thankfully, my remote lock is unreliable and the doors were still unlocked. I dove in and manually locked them. The kids surrounded the car, 2 at the front and 2 at the back. I felt completely trapped. People love to say, "I just run them over." It's easy to be tough in hindsight, but in that moment, I was terrified and disoriented. The idea of flooring it into a group of teenagers didn't even feel real, just horrifying. They started attacking the car, kicking, pounding on the windows, trying to break them. I could really only see one clearly, the one in front of the car. He was skinny, with green hair, and he was smashing my hood with both fists and some kind of metal pipe or similar object in his other hand. What stuck with me was how young his face looked. That and the high-pitched voices yelling around the car. They were kids, but they were vicious. I knew if they kept it up, they were going to get inside eventually. I hate admitting it, but at a certain point, I just started to mentally give up and accept that I might be seriously hurt or worse. Then something happened that probably saved my life. A car pulled into the rest area, catching the attention of the 2 teens behind my vehicle. They stepped away and drifted toward the new arrival, clearly sizing it up. The driver must have taken one look at the scene, either my car under attack or 4 figures in the dark approaching them, and immediately floored it back onto the highway. That brief distraction was all I needed. I slammed the car into reverse, stomped on the gas, spun around, threw it into drive and gunned it out of there, the same way that other car had. In my rearview mirror, I saw those skinny little silhouettes trying to chase me on foot. Once I hit the highway, they were gone. That was the longest drive of my life. I couldn't call for help because they had my phone, and I was too shaken to stop anywhere else. I just drove straight to work. When I got there, I finally called the police and told them everything, especially where it had happened. I hoped they'd send a unit to the rest stop in case those kids tried to jump someone else. Looking back, I wasn't in the best headspace. When I'd pulled into the rest area originally, there were no other cars and no people visible. Those kids must have been hiding somewhere, literally waiting for someone to show up alone. It's sad that they were willing to go that far at that age. I never got my phone or wallet back. I canceled all my cards and replaced my ID and phone. Honestly, that was a small price to pay for keeping my life. About a month later, I called the local police department for an update. They told me no one had been found at the rest stop that night, and nobody else had reported being ambushed by teenagers there. They did mention arresting a 16-year-old boy for robbery who matched the description of one of the kids, but because he was a minor, he was released without real punishment. That was all they could tell me. They did eventually find my phone tossed in a trash can about 10 miles from the rest area. The screen was smashed, but the phone itself still worked. So that's my nightmare story about getting attacked by 4 kids. I still wonder what other people genuinely would have done. Would you have fought back and risked seriously hurting them, or done what I did and just tried to survive? At the start of this past summer, I had a night out that went about as wrong as possible. 4 friends and I all met at my apartment after work. We got ready there because I have 2 bathrooms. I just bought a new dress and for once, found the perfect excuse to wear these cute blue heels I'd picked up at a thrift store 2 years earlier. We spent about an hour doing our hair and makeup, talking, laughing, and were finally ready to leave for a big party. My friend Megan's boyfriend, Charlie, was throwing it at his family's barn. I know that sounds like the beginning of a bad horror movie, but we'd done this before. Charlie's parties were legit. DJ, dance floor, and plenty of room for people to crash at his house afterward. The only downside was the 45-minute drive from my place. We wouldn't get there until a little after 10:30. The barn was exactly where you'd imagine, out in the middle of nowhere. That's what made the parties great. No neighbors, no noise complaints, no one to bother. We never actually made it there that night. Megan and one of our other friends took a separate car. I rode with my friend Ashley so we could stop for beer on the way. Megan was already antsy about us running late, so we told her we'd just meet them at the barn. We grabbed the beer and headed out. About halfway there, you get off the highway, and the rest of the drive is just long, empty back roads. At night, those roads are pitch black. No houses, no streetlights, just 30 straight minutes of darkness until you reach Charlie's place. We were on one of those roads when it happened. Out of nowhere, a person burst out of the darkness into the middle of our lane, waving a bright flashlight directly at our car. Ashley swerved and nearly went off the road. We both screamed. She pulled over to the shoulder to catch her breath. That was mistake number 1. I was frantically telling her to just keep going because the figure with the flashlight was already walking quickly toward us. Ashley, still shaken from almost crashing, didn't seem to care. She just sat there trying to calm down. Right as she was finally about to pull away, the man reached her window. He was standing uncomfortably close. She cracked the window a few inches to hear him. That was mistake number 2. He said he'd just come from the same party we were headed to, and that he'd gotten a flat tire on the way and gone off the road. He claimed he'd lost his phone somewhere and needed to call for a ride. In a very calm, friendly voice, he said something like, "Look, I know I'm just some stranger on the side of the road and that's sketchy. I'm not asking for a ride or anything. I just need to use your phone to call someone. I was just at the party you're going to. We're all friends here, right?" Everything about it felt off. My gut screamed at me to get away. Ashley, though, is almost pathologically kind. Instead of asking for the number and dialing it herself, she handed him her phone through the crack in the window. He stepped a few feet away and appeared to be making a call. I was freaking out, but Ashley kept insisting it was fine. After a moment, he came back and dropped the phone back through the window gap, thanking her. For a second, I started to think maybe I'd overreacted. Then he asked if we could help him get his bag out of his car. Ashley frowned and asked why he'd need help with that. He said his car had gone off the road into thick brush, and he couldn't get to it safely on his own in the dark. One of us would need to hold his arm so he didn't slip and get hurt while he grabbed his bag. It didn't make sense, but up to that point, he hadn't done anything overtly threatening. Ashley hesitated, then unlocked her door. I grabbed her arm and whispered, "What are you doing?" She shushed me and opened the door anyway. The man kept repeating, thank you, every couple of seconds. I couldn't let her go alone into the dark with a stranger, so I got out too. So there we were, two girls in dresses and heels, following a random guy off the side of a back road in the middle of nowhere. I remember thinking, this is exactly how every dumb character dies in a horror movie. We walked to the side of the road, and he pointed down into the darkness, saying his car was just down there. Ashley and I looked at each other and asked why he wasn't shining his flashlight that way. He didn't answer. Instead, he started glancing around nervously, like he was waiting for something or someone. I smacked Ashley lightly on the arm and jerked my head toward our car. She finally seemed to get it. Without a word, we turned and ran. The man immediately chased us, calling out, "Hey, wait. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to freak you out. Please, I really need your help." We dove back into the car. That's when we saw that both tires on the driver's side were completely flat. We hadn't hit anything. There was no reason they should have blown out. Ashley tried to drive anyway, but the car was basically riding on the rims. We only managed to crawl forward a short distance. I called Megan, and Ashley dialed 911. Megan didn't pick up, so I fired off a text telling her exactly what was happening and begging her to send help. Ashley told the dispatcher where we were and what was going on. They said they'd send an officer as soon as possible. Less than 2 minutes later, a large truck rolled out from somewhere off the road and pulled in front of us, blocking our path. The man with the flashlight reappeared at Ashley's window and started pounding on the glass. He pressed a knife against it and grinned at us. It was the kind of smile that makes your blood run cold. We realized then he'd almost certainly slashed our tires when we'd stepped out to help him. And whoever was driving that big truck was clearly his accomplice. Those next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. He kept banging on the windows, showing us the knife, taunting us. We were sitting ducks, trapped between his truck and our disabled car, just waiting and praying the police would get there before he got in. Then out of nowhere, 2 more trucks roared down the road toward us. The man with the light saw them, bolted for the truck blocking us in, jumped inside, and the 2 vehicles sped off in the opposite direction. The 2 trucks that had just arrived were Charlie and a bunch of our friends from the party. Megan had gotten my text, told everyone what was happening, and they'd all piled into cars to come find us. In the chaos of making sure we were okay, nobody thought to grab a license plate number or even a really solid description of the attacker's truck. Everyone was just relieved we were alive. About 10 minutes after that, a single police cruiser finally showed up. We told the officer everything. He seemed more interested in the beer in our backseat than the fact that a man had just tried to lure and trap 2 women on a dark road. We hadn't even started drinking yet, but he was still more focused on the alcohol than the predator who just escaped. It still makes me furious. That man is almost certainly still out there, and who knows what he and his partner have done or will do to someone else. I hate admitting it, but sometimes being too kind can put you in serious danger. We were incredibly lucky to walk away unharmed. Not everyone in that situation would. A few weeks ago, I ended up getting pulled into a car crash situation I'll probably never forget. Part of my weekday commute runs through my city's business district. The area is crowded with small bars and restaurants, and every workday around 5 p.m., lawyers, executives, and office workers pour into them to drink and unwind. With that much alcohol involved, it's no surprise that a lot of accidents happen, especially at one particular intersection that everyone has to pass through to leave the city for the suburbs. It's notorious. I'm not exaggerating when I say I probably lose a full day's worth of time every month sitting in traffic while wrecks are cleared there. It's dangerous enough that many people in the community have complained to the mayor and city council, begging them to address it. Nothing ever changes. One evening in the middle of last month, I was heading home and approaching that intersection when I saw the crash happen in real time. I was coming down a hill toward the light when one car plowed into the side of another, T-boned it hard. It was surreal to watch. When I reached the bottom of the hill, I pulled into a nearby parking lot and ran toward the wreck, hoping I could help. I reached the car that had caused the accident first. The driver looked extremely dazed but not visibly injured. I opened his door and asked if he was all right. The smell of alcohol hit me like a wall. My heart sank. He was clearly drunk, and given how out of it he was, I had no idea what injuries he might be ignoring. A moment later, another man rushed up and asked if the driver was hurt. I pulled him a few steps away and quietly told him the driver was drunk. The guy clenched his jaw and started cussing under his breath. While we were talking, we didn't notice that the drunk driver had gotten out of his car and was wandering around, agitated. A couple more bystanders showed up and pointed it out, and we all tried to get him to sit back down in his vehicle. During the commotion, one of the new arrivals must have caught the smell too. He suddenly shouted, "This guy's drunk." The driver heard that and got even more irritable, arguing and complaining. Just then, the driver of the other car walked up. He asked how the drunk guy was doing. Without hesitation, the man who just yelled repeated loudly that the guy was drunk. The other driver's expression flipped from concern to raw fury in a heartbeat. He started yelling that his son had been hurt because of this drunk idiot. Then he exploded. He shoved past all of us, lunged at the drunk driver, and tackled him to the ground. He punched him over and over, then started kicking him in the face while he lay there. We rushed in, pulled him off, and one big bystander walked him back toward his own car, talking to him the whole way. We tried to coax the drunk driver back into his car. Less than 30 seconds later, the first police car and an ambulance pulled up. An officer and EMT checked on the drunk driver. Then the officer came over to us and asked why the man was beaten up. We all exchanged nervous looks. Finally, one guy spoke up and said the driver had tried to walk away from the crash, and when we stopped him, he'd gotten violent and we had to restrain him. No one contradicted that story. The officer stared at us for a few seconds like he didn't entirely buy it, then just said okay and walked off. I later learned more about the other driver's son. He'd been on the side of the car that got T-boned. The airbag had forced his glasses into his face, cutting him up, and he'd also broken his arm. As a parent myself, I could understand the rage. That night, I replayed the scene over and over in my head. I don't really feel guilty about what happened to the drunk driver. He chose to drink and get behind the wheel, and he hurt a kid. It's hard to feel sorry for him getting his face kicked in. At the same time, I don't support vigilante justice. The dad could have gone too far easily, but I get it. I wish I could tell you how things turned out legally, but there hasn't been any coverage about it. Drunk driving crashes are so common at that intersection now that the local news barely bothers with them. The roads can be dangerous in ways you don't expect, not just from accidents, but from the emotions that follow. Stay alert, drive safe, and try not to end up in a situation like that, or something even worse. This next story happened last September. I had just started working at Walmart when someone messaged me on Instagram asking if they could use one of my photos for a portrait. They said I'd be paid for it. I needed the money badly. My job hadn't started paying me yet, so I agreed. They sent me a decent amount and I was pretty happy. Not long afterward, though, they messaged again, saying they'd accidentally sent too much and needed a portion of it back. They said I could keep some. That didn't raise any red flags for me at the time, so I sent back what they requested. The next morning, they messaged again asking for even more money back. I told them I was getting ready for work. They replied demanding I send it right now and even tried to call me. I ignored the calls and blocked them. While I was at work, I got a text from another number. "Why did you block me?" I blocked that one too. Right after that, a different number texted me something along the lines of, "I'm a bad guy, and if you keep ghosting me, I'll kill your loved ones. Then I'll kill you." They followed it up with 3 gruesome photos of dead people. I was terrified. I texted my mom, and later when I got off work, I told her I thought I needed to buy a $200 Apple gift card to pay them, or they'd hurt me and my parents. She talked it over with me calmly, and we decided to call the police instead. I told the officers everything from the beginning. They assured me nobody was coming to our house. When I asked how they could be so sure, they said they'd received many calls about the exact same scam, and that it was almost certainly someone overseas trying to extort people through threats. Hearing that helped a lot. Afterwards, I called my bank and explained the situation. I asked them to reverse any pending transfers that hadn't fully gone through yet, and they did what they could. I was shaken up for a while, but at least I knew I was safe. That's the scariest thing that's really ever happened to me. This last one happened years ago when I was still in high school. I was an athlete back then, playing both football and baseball. My dream was to play in college, and I did end up playing college football for a bit. But in high school, that meant I had to train constantly. One of my good friends, Miles, had fairly well-off parents and lived on a large property. Next to their house in the woods behind it, they had an old barn they'd converted into a full-on fieldhouse. It was one of the coolest setups I'd ever seen. There was a turf area, treadmills, 2 benches, a squat rack, batting cages, and all kinds of equipment along the walls. For a high school athlete, it was like a dream gym. During the off-season in winter, especially when it snowed and fields were unusable, we practically lived in that place. From November to March on school days, Miles and I got into a routine of waking up early and working out there every weekday morning before school. We'd start around 5:30 or 6 a.m., then head to class. One morning, I got up at 5:30 and drove the couple miles to his house. We met in his kitchen, then walked out to the field house together. Inside, it was mostly one huge open room, with a bathroom and a storage closet off to the side. The batting cages were around a corner. Sports gear lined the edges of the space. We started our usual routine in the weight area. Not long into the workout, I heard a strange noise from the direction of the batting cages. It sounded like something shifting or being moved. It was weird, because Miles was right next to me, and we were the only ones supposed to be there. I asked him if his dad or brother might be in the building. He said no, they were both inside the house. A bad feeling crept in. We decided to check it out and walked over toward the batting cages. The sound seemed to be coming from the storage closet right beside them. Miles slowly opened the closet door and then immediately jumped back. At first, I didn't see what had startled him. Then I noticed the figure crouched among the equipment. A random man neither of us had ever seen before, staring right at us. He started to stand up, grabbing a hockey stick from the pile of gear as he rose. We both backed away and then turned and ran for the front doors. The man stepped out of the closet, hockey stick in hand, holding it like a weapon as he moved toward us. He had a messy beard and was balding. That's about all I really remember of his appearance, just that, and the way he moved. Miles and I sprinted from the field house back to his house as fast as we could. We rushed inside, where his parents were in the kitchen, and blurted out what had happened. They immediately called the police and waited with us. About 5 minutes later, officers arrived and headed out to the field house. Surprisingly, the man was still there. When they confronted him, he tried to attack them with the hockey stick and was quickly arrested. We later learned he'd been on some kind of drugs and had been staying at a neighbor's home. He'd wandered through the woods in the night until he came across the field house. Miles's younger brother had forgotten to close the back door the night before, and the man had just walked in. I'm really grateful he didn't decide to swing that stick at us. He could have done some serious damage if he'd chased us instead of hesitating. That was probably the craziest thing that ever happened to me in high school. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here again. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it all the way to the end of the video. If you enjoyed the stories, please consider liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing if you haven't already. It really helps the channel out. If you have any feedback for me, feel free to leave it in the comments below. I do read through them whenever I can. If you'd like to send in a story of your own or contact me for any reason, You'll find links to my social media in the description: Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter. You can message me on any of those, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. If you decide to submit a story, please include in the subject line what the story is called, if it has a title, what type of story it is, and how you'd like to be credited in the description. Try to include as much detail as you're comfortable sharing, and use the best grammar and spelling you can to give your story the best chance of appearing in a future video. That's about it for now. Thank you all again for watching, and I hope you have a great day.